Next on Currents News, young pilgrims in the Brooklyn diocese are talking about how a festival of faith still affects their lives 1 year after going to World Youth Day.
She's the daughter of Bosnian war refugees, and now she's graduating at the top of her class. I'm Emily Druby, and coming up, I'll introduce you to one St. Francis student.
The death toll is rising and worries are growing over a mysterious virus that's sparking a global health emergency. President Trump says the U.S. is ready. Plus, in Iowa, Catholic priests are preparing their congregations for the upcoming presidential caucuses. National correspondent Christopher White is back from the state with that story. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Lydia Serrani. The Brooklyn Diocese is marking 1 year since pilgrims arrived in Panama for World Youth Day. The young people are now looking back on how the festival of faith has changed their lives, and they're discovering that bringing the faith to others doesn't end. Currents News' Tim Harfman has that story from Bay Ridge.
Pilgrims from the Brooklyn Diocese can't believe it's been a year since they landed in Panama for World Youth Day with Pope Francis.
I feel like time has just flown by. I was looking at pictures just the other day.
Sarah Carr and Christian McCormack are reflecting on their experience at the international gathering full of prayer and fellowship.
I was really shocked at how much joy and amazement that I got from it.
I find that I'm a much stronger person.
They, along with nearly 200 Catholics from Brooklyn and Queens, joined hundreds of thousands of pilgrims to unite as a church.
You're all connected for the same idea. You're all having the conversation, who is Jesus? Who is he to you?
They returned to Brooklyn, sharing those conversations with friends who have turned away from the church.
I was amazed myself that they were starting to ask questions, and that's the important part.
These two pilgrims are parishioners at St. Patrick's in Bay Ridge. Their church's group felt so inspired in Panama, coordinator Romeo Petrick says their minds were made up before they arrived home. They wanted to attend the next World Youth Day in Lisbon, Portugal.
While we were going to the opening event with the Pope, we called into the group that was hosting a wrestling fundraiser here at St. Pat's for Lisbon already.
The next World Youth Day is scheduled for 2022. In Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
Brooklyn Auxiliary Bishop Octavio Cisneros is leading all of his brother bishops in supporting the church in Latin America. He's the head of the U.S. Bishop's Office dedicated to the Latin American Church. This weekend, America's bishops are calling for a special collection in parishes across the country. Bishop Cisneros says the collection for the church in Latin America expresses our solidarity with and love for the people of Latin America. Tonight, we're getting word that a historic convent in Puerto Rico is nearly destroyed after the series of earthquakes rocked the islands. On January 7th, a powerful 6.4 quake hit the home of the Dominican Sisters of Fatima in Sanctity. The convent is more than 100 years old and sustained considerable damage, but experts are saying repairs can be made because the foundation is strong. The nuns who are okay have been relocated. The deadly and mysterious virus from China is spreading fast, and tonight the death toll is rising as well. Experts are saying that there is a potential global health emergency and they're struggling to contain the outbreak.
We have a lot to learn about this particular virus.
That virus, the coronavirus, now getting attention from the World Health Organization as a potential global health emergency. The mysterious virus has sickened hundreds across Asia, killed at least 17, and already made its way across the world to the United States. There's a confirmed case in Seattle, Washington.
This is not a moment of high anxiety. We should all do exactly what we always do, which is this is flu season, so we wash our hands, we cover our mouths when we sneeze.
Airports across the country, including two of the busiest, New York's JFK and Chicago's O'Hare, already screening travelers for the flu-like symptoms.
Any traveler who screens positive for potential illness would not pass through the general airport population.
The previously unknown and contagious illness emerged from the city of Wuhan in China. Chinese travelers are taking precautions such as wearing face masks. Wuhan travelers are also having their temperatures taken at train stations. With the Lunar New Year holiday about to begin, hundreds of millions of Chinese are expected to travel. And although they'll undergo screening, experts warn it may not be effective.
People could get through airport screening who don't have any symptoms or don't have any fever, and then by the time they arrive in their destination, the symptoms evolve.
Dr. Anthony Fauci is the director of the U.S. Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, and he says the organization is ready for the ever-changing crisis.
Well, it really is an evolving situation, and we have to be prepared for the worst. I mean, I don't think there's cause for panic on anyone's part, but we certainly need to be following it and watching this very carefully.
Scientists are also warning that the pneumonia-like virus is growing in strength as it passes from person to person and could even be mutating. Tonight, the city where the virus started is looking very different. China is shutting down transportation from Wuhan, where 10 million people live, only days before the Chinese New Year. The streets of Wuhan are usually packed around this time of year, but not now. David Culver reports from the scene.
The weather matching the mood here in Wuhan, China, a bit dampened in the celebrations ahead of what is normally the most festive time of year, the Lunar New Year. Think of New York's Fifth Avenue ahead of Christmas, normally packed, right? Well, that would be this area. It's rather sparse. Not a lot of folks out, and the folks that are out, many of them are taking the health officials' advice and they're wearing their masks. We are too. It was interesting leaving Beijing by train, about a 5.5-hour ride here to Wuhan. And when we got on the train, I would say about half the people were wearing masks and taking the precautions. Getting off the train in Wuhan, 95% of the people easily were wearing masks. And one by one, as we exited the rail station, they had staff putting a thermometer to our heads to check our temperature, to determine whether or not we were running a fever. One of the things we wanted to see firsthand here in Wuhan was the epicenter of this, where health officials believe the source of the coronavirus is, and that is the seafood and wildlife market. We went there, checked it out. It's very difficult to even get close to it. That's because security and police have cordoned off the area. They've blocked it off from anyone getting near. In fact, as even we got out of our car, shortly thereafter, security ushered us away. No one in, no one out. That is how seriously they are taking this here in Wuhan, China. And overall, folks are feeling the unease. David Culver, Wuhan, China.
President Trump is assuring Americans that the U.S. has the deadly virus, quote, totally under control. The president was asked about the outbreak as he wrapped up his trip to Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum. Trump said the only confirmed case in the United States was a Washington State man who had been in Wuhan. The president also added that a plan is in place to deal with the disease. Voters will have a chance for the first time to make their choices for president in less than 2 weeks at the Iowa caucuses. Catholics in the state are likely to play a key role in selecting a winner. The national correspondent for the Tablet and Crux, Christopher White, is just back from Iowa, where priests are helping their congregations prepare for the upcoming vote. He joins us now. Welcome, Christopher, as always.
Thanks, Lydia. Good to be back with you.
Now, normally priests, they don't preach politics from the pulpit, but they are encouraging their parishioners to vote. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, that's right. You know, one of the things that the priests like to say that, you know, if you can do it, you should. And that when it comes to voting, now you have to vote with your conscience, and they walk a fine line not to talk politics. And, you know, one of the priests I talked with, Father Tom Hennon, who's a chaplain at St. Ambrose, spoke to me about that. Let's listen to what he had to say.
We entrust people. We believe people are, we have an intellect and a will. Mm-hmm. And to entrust people to use those gifts wisely, even for the governance of human society. That's a gift from God.
I think one of the things he really wants to drive home is, you know, part of being faithful citizens is sort of discerning and thinking seriously about the voting process.
Right, absolutely, to get involved in the process. Now, a lot of Catholics, I guess a lot of people would say they're the ultimate swing voter because they don't really identify with a specific party. What are priests telling their parishioners when it comes to that?
Yeah, well, one major thing is that, you know, a lot of Catholics feel homeless today. And again, Father Tom spoke to that, so let's listen to what he had to say.
inform yourself about the candidates and what they say on those things. Inform yourself, take this to prayer, and make the best vote that you possibly can according to your conscience.
One of the things he really drove home is many Catholics don't feel at home as a Republican or a Democrat, but still want to participate in the process, so it's a matter of discerning how to do that.
And you also found that a lot of priests don't actually participate in the caucuses. Why is that?
Yeah, Pew Research Foundation had some interesting data recently saying Catholics, more than any other group, don't know who their priests are aligned with politically, and many consider that a good thing, including Father Tom, who says, I don't want to go to a caucus where I have to announce my vote. I don't want my parishioners to know which party I'm registered with. I don't want to have that sort of influence on them.
Christopher White, national correspondent for the Tablet and Crux, thank you so much, as always, for being here with us. Now to Capitol Hill, House prosecutors are making their opening arguments in the trial of President Trump. All 7 of the impeachment managers have up to 24 hours over 3 days to convince senators to convict the president. Then Trump's legal team will have the same amount of time to give their side. The president is charged with abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. If convicted, he would be removed from office. There's a lot more news headed your way. The story of a remarkable young woman. Her parents were war refugees. Now she's at the top of her class in a Brooklyn Catholic college. A leading New York voice in the fight to save the unborn is more hopeful than ever ahead of the March for Life. And Pope Francis is sending out his best wishes for the Chinese New Year. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip with us? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Nermina Markisic tops her class at Brooklyn St. Francis College. She's also the valedictorian, delivering a message against religious persecution. That's because she's the daughter of war refugees. Currents News' Emily Druby has that story from downtown Brooklyn.
As Nermina Markisic marches towards her future, she can't help but think about her family's past.
My family came to the United States as refugees with my baby sister and my grandmother and my uncle.
They fled Islamic persecution and the Bosnian War.
It was the ethnic cleansing, religious persecution, and genocide of the Bosnian people. So it was really hard to live there for a while, not just because of the war, but because of the intolerance that existed within the region.
The family escaped to America and settled in Brooklyn in 1995. They had Nermina just a few years later. Now at St. James Cathedral Basilica, their struggle is paying off.
Class of 2020 Winter Valedictorian, Nermina Markisic.
As they watched their daughter graduate from St. Francis College at the top of her class.
I'm just happy. I can't explain. I'm telling my friends, don't you see my wings? I folded them for now, but I'm flying. She's just gonna make a mark on this world for sure.
And in order for us to be where we are today, somebody down the line had to struggle. My mother and my father are the ones who had to fight, quite literally, so that I could be where I am today.
Nermina honoring her past with both her words and a special cap dedicated to her uncle who died in the war. Using her family and her country's struggle as motivation to strive for success.
That's the reason I work hard every day, is just so that they don't feel like they came here for no reason.
Up next for Nermina, she'll be applying to law school to study international law. She says one day she hopes to give back to Bosnia. In downtown Brooklyn, Emily Druby, Currents News.
President Trump is declaring this to be National Sanctity of Human Life Day. The presidential proclamation states that the nation proudly and strongly reaffirms a commitment to protect the precious gift of life at every stage. January 22nd is the day the U.S. Supreme Court handed down the Roe v. Wade decision in 1973, making abortion a constitutional right. Today not only marks the anniversary of Roe v. Wade, it's also the one-year anniversary of Governor Andrew Cuomo's signing of New York's extreme abortion law, the Reproductive Health Act. The measure permits taking the life of an unborn child even up to the moment of birth. Kathleen Gallagher, Director of Pro-Life Activities for the New York State Catholic Conference, joins me now to talk about these anniversaries. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, a year ago, when the New York Abortion Act was signed, you had warned that the law would have a serious impact. It turns out you were right. What are you most concerned about?
Well, we're certainly concerned that the number of late-term abortions is going to increase. Not a good thing. We've already heard from the pro-choice activists and advocates who are saying that they're disappointed and disheartened that more late-term abortion providers are not providing that so-called service. So thankfully, those numbers haven't gone up yet, but we're fearful that they will. We're also finding out that the state education department, which licenses medical professionals, doesn't even know what the Reproductive Health Act meant when it said not only doctors can perform abortions, but other medical professionals can too. They're asking the legislature for some clarity, like, who did you mean here? So there's a lot of confusion, and we're very worried about it.
And as you just mentioned, the law allows non-doctors to perform these abortions. How is this actually dangerous for women?
Well, clearly, we don't know who those non-doctors are going to be, but if they're not doctors, they have less experience and they have less medical training. So we think that is dangerous for women.
Can pro-lifers ever hope to get this extreme law repealed?
Not in the near future, no. That's just impossible because we have a hostile legislature. But here's the hopeful part. I think we have to look at the enactment of this law, which was discouraging, disheartening, and angering all at once. But look at what it meant. It meant that the abortion advocates know their time is short. Fewer and fewer abortion clinics open now. We have the number of abortions going down. We have more pro-life judges and justices being appointed. And more importantly, we have a generational shift where the public opinion polls are showing young people are much more pro-life than their parents and grandparents. So Planned Parenthood and the pro-abortion forces, they see all this. So they're trying to scramble at the state level, like New York, to get laws like this passed because they see it eroding at the federal level. And that's a good thing.
And as I mentioned, today is the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. Some pro-life advocates feel that this could be the year that everything changes in the debate over saving unborn lives because the Supreme Court will hear its first abortion case with conservatives in the majority. Your thoughts on this?
I very much believe with all my heart and soul it will be overturned. Abortion will be abolished. I think it's going to take a while, though. I think the High Court has to more and more chip away at that right and kind of erode it over the years. I don't think that the Chief Justice Roberts Court is ready to overturn it just yet.
Friday is the giant March for Life in Washington, D.C. How do you think the pro-life movement is doing?
Going to that march and seeing all the young people there, high school age, college age, it's so invigorating and affirming for those of us who have been in this movement for a long time because they are the future.
Kathleen Gallagher, thank you so much, Director of Pro-Life Activities for the New York State Catholic Conference. Thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you.
NetCV is New York's Catholic station and will televise live coverage of the big March for Life activities happening this week. The opening mass of the National Prayer Vigil for Life will be broadcast live tomorrow starting at 5:30 from the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception, and complete coverage of the march in Washington will be on the air Friday starting at 12 noon. Tonight, they're calling it a miracle. A tractor trailer got stuck on railroad tracks in Rockland County with a commuter train fast approaching.
Oh my goodness. Oh boy. Oh my God.
Incredibly, no one was killed or even hurt in that Metro North train crash you just saw. Last night, this happened just after 6 p.m. The commuter train sliced right through a tractor trailer stopped on a railroad crossing in Sloatsburg, that's in Rockland County. The tractor trailer was carrying office supplies, which then spilled all over the scene. The MTA is still investigating why the truck was stopped on the tracks. Still to come on Currents News, why a church in Rome is keeping its doors open all the time. And a boy visits the stage when Pope Francis delivers his talk to pilgrims. Before we go to break, we have a programming note. Coming up tomorrow, part 2 of our special series on human trafficking. Tamara Lane is one-on-one with a roundtable of courageous women who share their personal stories of terror and triumph, how they went from victim to survivor. It's Human Trafficking Exposed, tomorrow at 7, right here on Currents News. Pope Francis is sending his best wishes to everyone who celebrates Chinese New Year. It's a major holiday for ethnic Chinese and non-Chinese people all over the world. The New Year begins on Saturday, and this morning, Francis said he's wishing the virtues of welcome, wisdom, and respect for all. The New Year is dedicated to the rat. One of the top Catholic parishes in Rome is now keeping its doors open all of the time. The church is taking the step to help the homeless. Melissa Butts has that story.
This parish in the heart of Rome is open 24 hours a day for the people who need it most, the homeless. Now we'll also have these new simple beds, so 90 people do not have to sleep outside during the cold winter nights. This initiative was launched by the Spanish NGO, Messengers of Peace.
Thanks to this, we see how society is not sick. On the contrary, it is healthy, helpful, and rich in values. Call it what you want, but people will always be supportive. Ask, open your arms, and receive. This place is an example of that.
The famous Spanish singer Raphael, who sold more than 50 million records throughout his successful career, traveled to Rome to sponsor both the opening of the room and this humanitarian organization.
This is good charity, and hopefully it will be very successful and multiply, like bread and fish. The important thing is the people themselves support these projects, be they famous or not. It does not matter. Before God and all important things, it doesn't matter if a person is famous or not.
A few hours earlier, both Father Angel and Raphael attended Mass at Casa Santa Marta with the Pope. They explained this project to the Pope and gave him a very special gift.
We met in Buenos Aires a while ago, but this time, knowing that he is very fond of tango, I brought him my personal tango album. It was a beautiful moment. The Pope wrote us a beautiful letter when he opened this church to the homeless. He told us he was glad there were churches open 24 hours because some look more like museums, they have been closed for so long.
In the Eternal City, this church is the opposite. It represents what Pope Francis has so often asked, for churches to be a field hospital for those who suffer the wounds of this world, both in their soul and on their body. In Rome, Melissa Butts, Currents News.
And finally tonight, smiles and laughter when the Pope preached to pilgrims at the Vatican today. It wasn't something the Holy Father did or said, but rather a visitor who came up on stage.
I also greet the priests of the Institute for Continuing Theological Education of the Pontifical North American College.
We still don't know the little boy's name, but the Holy Father didn't seem to mind the child one bit. That upstaged him. Well, that's Currents News tonight. I'm Lydia Serrani. Thank you so much for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time. Good night.